The Bentley, a dark, gleaming beetle against the sun-baked terrain, lurched violently. Reginald Thornton, knuckles bone-white on the wheel, fought for control. The suspension groaned in protest as he rammed through a tangle of scrub, thorns screeching against the flawless paint. He was beyond caring. A plume of ochre dust spiraled behind him, a tangible manifestation of his despair. Before him, the savannah stretched, an endless panorama of parched grasses and thorny trees shimmering in the brutal heat. An interloper, he had no rightful place in this world. Then he saw it. An acacia, a titan of the veldt. Its ancient, contorted branches reached skyward like desperate pleas. A solitary sentinel guarding a patch of cracked earth, it offered only a meager sliver of respite. Tires screaming, Reginald braked hard, killing the engine. Silence descended, broken only by the drone of unseen insects. He sat, perspiration slicking his forehead, plastering his meticulously styled hair. His gaze, vacant, saw only the abyss that had opened in his life. On the passenger seat, the bag felt like a physical weight, crushing him. His hand trembled as he reached for it. The canvas felt rough, alien against the Bentley's supple leather. He couldn't bring himself to look inside, but he knew. 2 fragile lives, their destinies now his burden. He stepped into the oven-like air, heat washing over him. Stiffly, he moved to the passenger side. The bag was heavier than he expected. He carried it to the base of the acacia, gently lowering it onto the scorched earth. Kneeling, his hand hovered above the opening. He longed to glimpse them, to offer one final touch. But shame held him captive. Coward. Monster. A man undone by an irreversible choice. He rose abruptly, heart hammering. Turning, he stumbled back to the car, unable to meet the gaze of the ancient tree. The door slammed shut, the sound magnified in the stillness. He ignited the engine, the roar a jarring violation. Shifting into gear, he floored the accelerator. The Bentley leaped forward, leaving a vortex of dust in its wake. He drove blindly, the landscape a blur of browns and greens. He craved escape, to outrun the guilt gnawing at his insides. But he knew with chilling certainty, there was no absolution. He remained chained to this place, to this moment, to the secret interred beneath the acacia. Only a film of dust marked the place where innocence lay. A mother's watch. The Land Rover, a metallic scar on the ochre landscape, finally disappeared over the rise. The leopardess, Callie, remained motionless, a tawny statue camouflaged in the tall, dry grass. Dust motes danced in the wake of the vehicle, slowly settling, leaving behind only the silence of the African plains, and the scent. It was an alien smell, sharp and chemical, overlaid with a faint, milky sweetness. It emanated from the brightly colored bag, abandoned haphazardly near the acacia where she'd often sought shade. Callie had watched the strange creature, the man, place it there. His movements jerky and unsettling. She didn't understand his purpose, only knew that he had violated the rhythm of the savannah. Her cubs, hidden in a den nestled beneath the roots of a baobab tree a few hundred meters away, were her priority. But something about the bag, the lingering scent, it tugged at her. She rose, a fluid movement of muscle and bone, and padded forward, her belly low to the ground. The wind shifted, carrying the scent more strongly. Callie paused, nostrils flared, testing the air. The chemical tang was stronger now, but beneath it, something else. Something vulnerable. Caution warred with a primal urge. She circled the bag, her amber eyes narrowed, assessing. The fabric was rough, unfamiliar. She nudged it with her nose. It shifted slightly, emitting a soft rustle. Callie recoiled, her ears pricked forward, every muscle tense. Silence. Then a sound. Faint, high-pitched, like the distressed call of a newborn impala. But different. Infinitely more fragile. Callie circled again, a low growl rumbling in her chest. The sound came again, louder this time, a desperate wail that resonated deep within her. It was the sound of hunger, of fear, of utter helplessness. Her maternal instincts, honed over years of survival, roared to life. The danger of the unknown bag, the strangeness of its scent, faded into insignificance. There was only the cry. A cry that echoed the cries of her own cubs, demanding her protection, her sustenance. She pawed at the bag, claws extended, tearing at the unfamiliar fabric. The bright colors ripped easily, revealing something small and pale and wriggling. Another cry, even more urgent, pierced the air. Callie hesitated for only a heartbeat. The contents of the bag were not hers, not of her kind. But they were vulnerable. They were helpless. And they were calling for their mother. She lowered her head, her powerful jaws opening gently. An unlikely family. The weight of the burlap sack shifted with each stride, the rough weave scratching against her teeth, but the leopardess held firm. She trusted her instincts, the primal hum in her chest that had overridden her initial apprehension. These were not her cubs, but they were vulnerable, and something within her fiercely rejected the idea of leaving them to the mercy of the savannah. The familiar scent of her den, a shallow cave nestled amongst the roots of an ancient baobab, filled her nostrils. A chorus of soft chirps greeted her arrival. Her own cubs, barely a few weeks old, tumbled out of the darkness, their blue eyes wide with curiosity. They were miniature versions of herself, all clumsy paws and playful nips. She deposited the sack gently in the center of the den, tearing it open with a careful swipe of her claw. The human babies, still swaddled in the soft cloth, stirred. Their cries were weak, but they were alive. Her cubs, initially wary, crept closer, sniffing tentatively at the strange bundles. One bolder cub, a male with a particularly dark rosette pattern, batted at a dangling corner of the cloth, eliciting a gurgle from one of the infants. A low growl rumbled in the leopardess's chest, not of aggression, but of warning. The cubs retreated slightly, their playful energy momentarily subdued. She nudged the human infants with her nose, checking their warmth, their breathing. They were small, impossibly small, compared to her own offspring. The scent of milk, rich and life-giving, filled the den. Her cubs instinctively began to knead at her belly, their tiny claws pricking her skin. She settled down, offering her teats to her feline offspring. Then, with a gentleness that belied her powerful frame, she nudged one of the human infants closer. It instinctively turned its head, searching for the source of the scent. Hesitantly it latched on. The leopardess tensed, every muscle in her body alert, but the infant suckled with a desperate hunger. She closed her eyes, a wave of exhaustion washing over her, but also a strange sense of peace. The other human infant whimpered. The leopardess shifted, rearranging the cubs and infants until all were nestled against her warmth, their tiny mouths latched onto her life-giving milk. The den, usually filled with the playful chaos of feline cubs, was now quiet, save for the rhythmic suckling and the soft, contented sighs of the unlikely family. Outside, the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the savannah in hues of orange and purple. The sounds of the night filled the air. The chirping of crickets, the distant howl of a hyena, the rustling of leaves in the wind. But within the sheltered darkness of the den, there was only the quiet intimacy of a mother's love, extended beyond species, beyond instinct, to embrace the abandoned and the vulnerable. The healer's discovery. Zola squinted, the afternoon sun baking the ochre earth. From her vantage point atop the baobab, she could see the leopardess, Callie, moving through the tall grasses. Callie was a familiar sight, but today something was different. A parade of cubs, far too many for one litter, tumbled after her. Zola counted 7, maybe 8. Unnatural. Callie paused near the rocky outcrop, her sleek body a ripple of muscle. The cubs swarmed her, mewling and nipping. Zola felt a prickle of unease. The savannah was unforgiving. Such a large brood would struggle to survive. She decided to investigate, her bare feet padding silently down the tree's rough bark. She kept her distance, moving like a shadow through the acacia trees. The air hummed with cicadas and the distant cry of a hawk. As she drew closer to the outcrop, a strange scent drifted to her, something other than earth and animal musk. It was a milky, almost sweet smell like human infant. Zola's breath hitched. Impossible. She crept forward, peering through the dense undergrowth. Callie had disappeared into a crevice in the rocks, presumably the entrance to her den. The cubs remained outside, a writhing mass of spotted fur. But then Zola saw them. Two small pink forms nestled amongst the leopard cubs. Human babies. They were tiny, their skin surprisingly clean. One sucked on a leopard cub's ear, while the other gurgled, batting at the air with a chubby hand. Callie emerged from the den, her amber eyes watchful. She nudged the human infants closer to her belly, as if offering them for nursing. Zola's mind reeled. Abandoned. Raised by a leopard. The incongruity of it struck her as both miraculous and terrifying. The survival of these children defied all logic. Callie, normally wary of humans, had taken them in. But for how long? And what would happen when they grew older, bigger than her own cubs? She watched as Callie began to groom one of the babies, her rough tongue surprisingly gentle on its delicate skin. The baby cooed, seemingly content. Zola felt a surge of compassion, not just for the children, but for the leopardess, burdened with this impossible task. Zola knew, with a certainty that resonated deep within her bones, that she had to do something. These children were not meant to live as wild animals. But could she separate them from the only mother they had ever known? The thought was agonizing. A vow of protection. The sun dripped gold onto the savannah, painting the swaying grasses in hues of honey and amber. Zola watched, mesmerized, as Callie nudged one of the infants closer with her massive velvet paw. The cub, startled, mewed softly, a sound so fragile it felt like a raindrop on parched earth. Callie responded with a low rumble, a vibration that seemed to settle the very air around them. Zola had seen wildness, raw and brutal, in this land. She knew the leopardess was capable of tearing a gazelle apart in seconds, of defending her territory with unmatched ferocity. Yet, here she was, a creature of instinct and power, cradling human children with a gentleness that rivaled her own mother's. The paradox stirred something deep within Zola, a protective instinct she hadn't known she possessed. Each small breath of the children was a defiance of the cruelty that had brought them here. The memory of the discarded satchel, the callous indifference of their abandonment, burned in her mind. She couldn't fathom such a heart, a soul so devoid of compassion. She knew what would happen if word got out. Hunters would swarm the area, eager to claim the leopard-raised children, as if they were some exotic trophy. Scientists would poke and prod, reducing them to specimens in a lab. And worse, much worse, someone like the man who had left them would return, perhaps seeking to exploit them, to reclaim what he had so carelessly discarded. The thought solidified her resolve. These children, these precious, unexpected gifts, were under her protection now. The savannah had chosen its champion, a creature of grace and strength. But it also needed a shield, a human guardian to navigate the treacherous world beyond the tall grass. Zola rose, her shadow stretching long across the golden expanse. She placed a hand on the ancient acacia, its bark rough beneath her fingers. The wind whispered through its leaves, carrying the scent of dust and distant rain. "I vow," she said, her voice firm, barely a breath above the rustling grass, "to keep your secret. These children will be safe. No one will know of their existence, unless I deem them worthy. I will protect them and this land from any who would seek to harm them." The sun dipped further, casting long shadows that danced like spirits on the savannah floor. Zola watched Callie, a silent promise passing between them. The leopardess, as if understanding, lifted her head, her amber eyes gleaming with a knowing light. Zola knew then, with unwavering certainty, that her life had irrevocably changed. She was no longer just an observer. She was a guardian, bound by a vow to protect the innocent and the wild. The savannah held its breath, waiting. Return and regret. The thorns tore at Reginald's expensive linen shirt, but he didn't notice. He'd abandoned the Land Rover miles back, the engine's mocking purr a sound he couldn't bear to hear a moment longer. Each step was a penance, the dry earth crunching a mournful counterpoint to the frantic hammering in his chest. He tasted bile, a metallic tang that coated his tongue and clung to the roof of his mouth. The acacia tree loomed, a skeletal sentinel against the bruised purple of the dawn sky. He stumbled towards it, his eyes fixed on the patch of parched earth beneath. A bag had to be there. It was me. The sight hit him like a physical blow. He sank to his knees, the coarse ground digging into his skin, a mirror of the pain clawing at his insides. Me. He reached out, his fingers tracing the rough weave of the fabric, now limp and lifeless. Had scavengers? The thought choked him, a silent scream trapped in his throat. He pictured them tiny, vulnerable. He squeezed his eyes shut, burying his face in the dirt. "Forgive me," he rasped, the words swallowed by the vast, indifferent landscape. "Please forgive me." He didn't deserve forgiveness, not from anyone. He was a monster, a stain on the earth. He should stay here, rot with the acacia, become one with the guilt that would forever consume him. A twig snapped nearby. Reginald flinched, his head jerking up. He saw nothing but the swaying grasses, the silent, judging trees. Paranoia gnawed at him. He was exposed, vulnerable. The authorities would be looking for him soon. He had to leave. He scrambled to his feet, the empty bag clutched in his hand like a cursed relic. He turned blindly and fled, back towards the distant mocking safety of the Land Rover. Every rustle of leaves, every chirp of a bird, sounded like an accusation. High on the ridge, obscured by the dappled shade of a fever tree, Zola watched him go. Her face was etched with sorrow, a deep, ancient grief that mirrored the pain of the land itself. Reginald's despair was a tangible thing, a dark cloud clinging to the air around him. She remained motionless, a statue carved from earth and bone. He would never know they lived. The knowledge was a heavy weight, a secret she would carry until her dying breath, a bitter triumph. He deserved to suffer, to live with the torment of his actions. But the children, they were safe. And that, she knew, was all that truly mattered. Choice. The Land Rover choked, scattering gritty particles into the burgeoning light. Zola tracked its progress, a diminishing silhouette against the blazing horizon, until heat waves fractured its form into a phantom. Reginald Thornton was gone. Her grip remained firm on the rifle's weathered stock, but her hand still trembled slightly. A curious cocktail of emotions bubbled up, not the triumphant joy she'd anticipated, but a piercing, unexpected ache compounded of commiseration, repulsion. She swiveled her gaze towards the dense brush where Callie, the leopardess, suckled her 2 cubs, her sons. A corrosive truth threatened to breach her composure. "Under they live, Reginald." Under the words rasped against her inner throat, clamoring for release, threatening to dismantle the edifice of falsehood she'd erected upon their discovery. She conjured his face, the stark grief yielding to tentative delight, followed by, what then? Would he embrace them? Or would he, in his paternal claim, wrest them from the only mother they'd ever known, exile them from their ancestral domain? Zola visualized Callie, her luminescent eyes ablaze with maternal ferocity as she groomed the soft fur of the infants. They were flourishing, growing stronger with each sunrise, their infant calls interwoven with the leopardess's throaty murmurs. Wild creatures, now, irrevocably bound to the soul of the savannah. Yet Reginald, despite any remorse, remained Reginald. A man accustomed to civilized comforts, to dominion. He would never grasp the unspoken language of the veldt, the visceral connection between a mother and her young, regardless of species. He would inevitably attempt to impose his order, his structured existence, upon their untamed spirits. The thought sickened her, infusing her with a bone-deep dread far surpassing the terror she'd felt confronting armed intruders. These were no longer helpless babes. They were learning the arts of survival, the silent stalk, the deadly pounce. They were integrating into something ancient, something powerful. To disclose their existence now would be to sentence them to a life behind bars, to tear them from the earth that cradled them. To exchange the fierce, unconditional love of a wild mother for the sterile affection of a father burdened by guilt. She squeezed her eyes shut, the image of Reginald's ravaged expression battling with the vision of the cubs nestled against Callie's tawny flank. The balance shifted. The decision, though agonizing, was resolute. Her fingers relaxed on the rifle. Let him grapple with his demons, haunted by the specter of offspring he believed lost. It was a suitable reckoning. But the twins deserved a future, a chance to reign as lords of their own untamed realm. Turning from the dissipating dust cloud, Zola moved toward the thicket, drawn by the quiet symphony of leopardess and cubs. The atmosphere hummed with the scent of parched grasses, sun-baked soil, and the subtle, intoxicating aroma of wildness. Pulsed with life. Her choice was made. And now she would bear its weight. Guardians of the savannah. The dust swirled, settling on the thorn bushes after Thornton's vehicle disappeared over the horizon. Zola sat heavily on a termite mound, the weight in her heart heavier than the African sun. Had she done the right thing? Saving the twins meant defying the natural order, interfering in a human affair. But looking at the faint paw prints leading back to the thicket, she knew she couldn't have left them to die. Time bled into seasons. The twins, Leo and Leona, thrived alongside the leopard cubs, Nyoka and Shaba. A montage of sun-drenched days unfolded, clumsy tumbles turning into graceful leaps, hesitant growls mimicking Nyoka and Shaba's playful snarls, and tiny hands learning to grip branches with unwavering strength. The leopardess, Malika, treated them all as her own, her purrs a constant lullaby. Zola watched over them, a silent guardian. She taught them the language of the savannah, the rustle of wind warning of approaching storms, the frantic chirping of birds signaling danger, the subtle changes in the scent of the air foretelling rain. She showed them which roots eased pain, which leaves healed wounds, and the secrets hidden within the plants that bloomed only under the light of the full moon. Leo, with his sharp eyes, quickly learned to identify distant predators. Leona, her senses attuned to the subtlest vibrations, could sense approaching danger long before it became visible. Years sculpted their bodies, hardening them into lithe, capable protectors. One sweltering afternoon, a Land Rover, similar to Thornton's but lacking his ostentatious arrogance, rumbled into their territory. 3 men, rifles slung over their shoulders, emerged, their eyes scanning the horizon for easy prey. Leona, perched high in a baobab tree, saw them first. She dropped silently to the ground, a shadow moving through the tall grass. Leo, practicing his spear throwing near the watering hole, tensed, his hand instinctively reaching for his weapon. They moved in unison, a dance honed by years of practice. Leo created a diversion, mimicking the distress call of a wounded zebra. The poachers, their greed piqued, followed the sound, deeper into the savannah. Leona, meanwhile, circled behind them, setting snares with practiced ease, not to kill, but to immobilize. The first poacher stumbled, his foot caught in a rope. He cried out, alerting his companions. They turned, weapons raised, only to be met by Leo, appearing as if from nowhere. His spear held in a steady grip. He didn't attack. He simply stood his ground, his eyes blazing with a fierce protectiveness. "This is our land," he said, his voice a low growl that echoed through the trees. "Leave now, and you will be spared." The poachers hesitated, their bravado crumbling under the twins' combined presence. The air crackled with unspoken threat. Finally they lowered their rifles, their faces etched with fear. They helped their comrade out of the snare and limped back towards their vehicle, defeated. Zola watched from the distance, hidden amongst the acacias. A small smile touched her lips. The twins were more than just survivors. They were the savannah's shield. But she knew this was just the beginning. Thornton, she suspected, wouldn't let go so easily. The peace she had fought for was fragile, a delicate balance threatened by the greed that lurked just beyond the horizon. The real battle, she knew, was yet to come. An unbreakable bond. The sun dripped tangerine fire onto the horizon, igniting the umbrella thorns of the acacias. Embody sat on a weathered outcrop, the savannah's coarse dust familiar beneath his soles. Beside him, Esh's quiet hum accompanied the rhythmic dance of her bone needle on supple leather. "Remember the termite palace we envisioned?" Embody murmured, eyes following the undulations of the termite mounds scarring the landscape. A fond smile touched Esh's lips, arresting her nimble fingers. "And Mother's swift justice, preventing us from devouring them all. She possessed an uncanny knack for our schemes." A shared glance, thick with unspoken memories, passed between them. Theirs was a childhood woven from threads of wilderness. Raised by a leopardess, the boundless savannah was their realm, the symphony of nature their anthem. It was a life unfettered, brimming with untamed beauty, an intrinsic connection to the wild imprinted deeper than genetics. "Some might deem it a malediction, abandonment," Esh breathed, her voice a mere whisper against the gathering dark. "But I cherish it above all else." Embody's hand sought hers, his calloused fingers entwining with hers. "As do I. Esh, this breathes life into us. It is our rightful domain." Their extraordinary upbringing had forged a bond of steel, a symbiotic dance with the land and its inhabitants. They deciphered the wind's secrets, the urgency coded in a bird's cry, the subtle shifts in the grazing herds. This was a lexicon learned not within walls, but through instinct and the fight for survival. They had risen as protectors of the savannah, custodians of its delicate harmony. Those who threatened its peace feared them, the local communities respected them, and the creatures placed their trust in them. Offspring of the wild, they stood ready to defend it with every fiber of their being. From beneath the sprawling canopy of an ancient baobab, Zola emerged, her features clouded with apprehension. "The intruders grow increasingly brazen," she intoned, her voice a low rumble. "They target the elephant herds near the water's edge." Embody's jaw clenched, a hard line forming. "They will be stopped." Esh nodded, her eyes gleaming with a fierce resolve. As always. As the savannah surrendered to the embrace of night, they moved towards the heart of their territory, Zola shadowing their path. In the distance, twin orbs of jade ignited, observing their approach. Their leopard mother emerged to greet them, her muscular silhouette stark against the celestial canvas. A gentle nudge, a resonant purr, a silent reassurance. Embody and Esh sought the comfort of her warmth, drawing strength from the unwavering presence of their unconventional kin. Together they formed an unbroken circle, united by affection, devotion, and a shared vow to safeguard the wild. They stood prepared for the trials ahead, knowing that their bond, tested by the harshest realities, remained unbreakable.